The reason that e-commerce is so important is in large part related to the data here. Every year at Forrester, we put together 5-year e-commerce forecasts for probably about 20 different countries around the world. And when I aggregated into these 4 large markets, as you can see, there is double-digit growth that is projected to continue for the next 5 years across every market around the world that we're measuring. And the important piece is that for e-commerce, these numbers are exceeding physical store sales across the board. So what we have is that e-commerce is taking share away from physical transactions, and the consumer is choosing to complete their transactions in the online channel. That's not surprising. And we also see this across virtually every category that we measure. We see this in categories ranging from grocery delivery, which is very, very penetrated in markets like the UK and even Northern Europe, to consumers purchasing very, very high-ticket durable goods. I think the single most expensive item that was ever purchased on eBay was, in fact, a private plane. So we see this variety of every type of device actually being consumed on the internet. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a breakout of some of our own internal data from Forrester, we collect a lot of information about consumer behavior around the world, and through surveys, I just took an example of 4 of about the 30 categories that we measure. I thought that this was a good cross-section of different types of things that consumers are purchasing, media categories like books, apparel, consumer electronics, and food. And these numbers are across the board and in different markets. We have emerging markets like China and Brazil. And by the way, these are the metro regional areas for those 2 markets, where you see a very, very high penetration in categories like apparel or even consumer electronics. And then in the EU and the US, we're seeing differences in those categories as well. And the analogy that I like to use to really illustrate this is a chess analogy. I have a young daughter that she's 7 years old, and I made her join the chess club at her school. And one of the rules that she learned that I was, kind of, it reminded me of my own childhood, was the rule in chess where the least powerful piece on the chessboard is the pawn. And when that pawn moves to the other side of the board, when it happens several moves into the game, it becomes the queen, and that's called the pawn promotion. And what that is that it's this transformation from the least powerful piece to the most powerful piece. And it's a big deal because essentially that creates the end game, and at that point you've won, or you're close to winning. And I think that that's a very, very good analogy to what's happening in retail and e-commerce, where the e-commerce channel about a decade ago was very, very tertiary, and it was largely siloed. It was perceived as an afterthought. It really wasn't something that even received a lot of nurturing and investment. And the fact that over time it has transformed into essentially the most powerful channel for any given business, I think, is really the point that I think I want to make for the rest of this presentation. And it speaks to the importance not just of the online retail, but also the multi-channel and this expression that we hear often of omni-channel.